Hello, everyone. This is Chris Decker. I've got an update on some employment forecasts for the state of Nebraska and for the city of Omaha. It's Thursday, August 6th, 2020. We just got some weekly claims data from the Nebraska Department of Labor. And tomorrow, on the 7th, we're going to get a national employment report. And that national employment report will be for the month of July, and we won't see the state or local employment reports for July until August 21st. But I want to give you an idea where I think things have ended up in July, where I think things are going here in August. Last time I did a video, I was very negative about July, thinking we'd actually see some employment declines in July. I've revised things up a bit because we've got some weekly unemployment initial claims data, which came in much stronger than anticipated for the last 2 weeks of July, which is great news. I was never more happy to be wrong about a forecast than I was about that. So I do think that July may have some growth, but I think the job growth is going to be mitigated, and I'll explain why here shortly, as well as August. I think August might be a little bit slow going as well. Still growth, but not nearly the kind of growth we saw in May and June. So some recent evidence on what we've seen lately in terms of those weekly unemployment claims data for the state and for the city, um, and some information that might suggest what we're going to see tomorrow on the 7th for the national employment picture. Um, so just to kind of give you an idea where I'm seeing things happen here at the national level. For the first 2 weeks of July, national new unemployment claims were low. The last 2 weeks of July, they ticked up. Now, the latest, the first week of August, which is not depicted here in this first slide, did post some good news in terms of initial unemployment claims for the nation. We were down to about 1.9 million or so on a seasonally adjusted basis. So that's good news. It kind of puts that downward trend back in play. Still had this bump up in July. Maybe we're off to a good start with August. We'll see. There's some warning signs down the road. I was recently looking at some data that I frequently track on some consumer spending, some leading indicators on consumer spending that give some indication of credit card use by consumers, put out by JP Morgan. And through the end of July, we've seen kind of a slowing trend. The good news is that there was some upward trend after you got past March in terms of consumer spending, but it's really since leveled off here towards the end, and that generally predicts, at least with some degree of error, a slowdown in the economy. What do I mean by that? Well, the consumer is 70% of total gross domestic product. So if consumers are going to slow their spending down, that's going to not bode well for future growth in GDP, which is going to, suppress some job growth. Um, that seems to be tracking in what we've seen in terms of COVID cases. I suspect many of you seen figures like this before, where we had this massive surge in cases, and that, of course, has led to some increased hospitalization, some increases in the death rates, which is never really any good for an economy. And this could very well be the pattern which is causing some slowdown in spending. Now, the good news is the last few days of total cases in the United States have been coming down. That's great news. If we can keep that trend in place, that's going to be wonderful. I don't think we're at a trend point yet, but hopefully we're getting to a point where that'll be a true trend. We have to listen to the experts who look at those numbers closely and let us know what's going on here in terms of behavior. But this uptick that we saw through most of the month of July really did have some impact on a lot of states. A lot of states slowed their phased reopening plans. Some are considering some partial shutdown again. And again, like I said in other videos, all states are interrelated. So if you tend to see a slowdown in Texas, you might ultimately see an impact on Nebraska's economy as a result. In terms of where we are likely to go, and I'm anxious about tomorrow because it's hard to project when numbers are so volatile as they tend to be during this period of a business cycle. June, we had just a banner year in terms of jobs added, almost 5 million back. Now, of course, that's on the heels of the deplorable April loss of jobs on the order of about 21 million jobs lost. But we've got some of those back in May and June. My suspicion is that July's report will still look like we're adding jobs nationally. I'm thinking we might get a million back. Some reports are suggesting we could be at 1.5, 1.6 million jobs. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I just don't see it being anywhere near where we were in June. There's been some significant concerns, again, over the COVID situation and states kind of slowing their phased reopening. I don't think we're going to see some. So what I'm really suggesting here is a slowdown. And you can kind of see that in my graphic here, where we had that big bump in June and really dropping down here in July. Hopefully we're back on track in September, October. Um, I'm thinking that August may be a difficult month overall. We're off to a good start, but I think it may be difficult. I'm thinking we're going to be right around a million, probably a little under a million, maybe a little slower than July. When all is said and done, I'll be tracking the unemployment data rather for the nation over the next few weeks to see if I need to refine that for August. But right now, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern, maybe a little stalled right now in terms of robust growth nationally. In terms of the story here in Nebraska and in Omaha, so there's some bad news, and the bad news is that since the last time we spoke, where I had really gotten concerned about the initial unemployment claims for the state and for the city of Omaha, they were up quite a bit in the first 2 weeks of July, much higher than I had originally forecast, on the order of 8,000, 6,000. We were talking about right around the 4th of July, there around, 6 to 8,000 initial claims. And that was a spike relative to a forecast, which was about 4,000. That did prompt me to revise my forecast upwards, but as the world would have it, great news for the economy, not so good news for my forecast that was revised up. But the great news for the economy is that for the last few weeks in July, we've had some much lower than forecast values. I mean, we're under 4,000 in terms of initial claims on a weekly basis now. And in fact, the first week of August looked great. We were under 3,000, or about 2,800, really getting us back down to trends. So I am going to revise my forecast and kind of resurrect the original forecast that I had in place at the end of June, because I really think that trend is in place. That said, two things. The overall here for the month of July, what I'm calling here sad news, is that the last 2 weeks of July, which were very good, really, in my judgment, are enough to dominate the real challenges that the economy experienced in the early part of July. If you compare the 4 months in June compared to 4 months in July, there is an increase in initial claims. We went from 18,484 thereabouts to close to 22,000 total for the month. So that is an increase of about 3,354. Similar story for Omaha. The bad weeks in July seem to be dominating the good weeks in July, probably seeing overall relative to June a lot higher unemployment claims being filed. So again, where we had this really nice bounce in jobs in June, I don't think we're going to get that bounce in July. We've had some upticks here in COVID-19 cases in the state. Not as bad as other states, thankfully, but we're sort of seeing that U-shaped pattern. We were trending down really well till you got to about early to mid-July, in our case, where we started seeing these daily cases start somewhat of a trend upwards. Hopefully we can get that back under control. I think good hygiene practices and so forth are the best way to go with that. And given that there does seem to be a correlation between these movements in COVID cases and consumer behavior, if you recall that Chase figure that I had earlier, which showed the slowing of consumer purchases on credit and how that seemed to correlate with the subsequent figure for COVID cases in the United States. Similar kind of story here. So we're still better off as far as our economy goes if we keep these cases well under control. So July, I know July's in the books. We're well into June. I get all of that, but there's such a lag in the data that it's still worth our time trying to pin down what's going on with our economy. We're not going to see the actual numbers until the 21st, and those are advanced numbers that could get revised anyway. The last 2 weeks of July, weekly unemployment claims looked really, really good, and I think that may have saved the overall month in terms of job declines. I think the economy in July is going to look okay, but I don't think it's anything to get too hyper excited about. After the gain of close to 18,000 jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis for the state in June, I think we'll get about 3,000 additional jobs here in July. Now, 3 weeks ago, I was concerned we might lose 5,000 jobs, 7,000 jobs. Right now, I think we're going to get a gain, a modest gain. It wouldn't surprise me if we're a little bit higher than that, but I would be surprised if we're a lot higher than 3,000 additional jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis when we finally see those numbers. Similar kind of story in Omaha. I think Omaha's wonderful June report where we added close to 8,000 jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis. That's 7.7 thousand jobs. I think that will slow in June. I'm sorry, that should be July, not June. July, where in July I think we'll add about 2.7 thousand or maybe 2,900, a little under 3,000 jobs in the city. Most of the growth I still think is going to be in the Omaha area as far as the state's concerned. So a slowdown is what I'm thinking happened in July. Let's start talking about August and September. That's where it really matters. The rubber kind of hits the road. I think there's a mixed bag here. To start, I think we're off to a great start in terms of what I'm seeing on the initial unemployment claims and the continuing weeks of unemployment being claimed. That's still trending down. So all that's great news. I got some figures here I'll show you in just a minute. But the CARES Act stimulus, the $600 on top of the state supported unemployment compensation, that has expired. The brilliant minds in Washington are bickering over a bunch of things. I don't think a new stimulus package. I think one will be forthcoming. It's been delayed, which I think is inexcusable, but it's been delayed, and I don't think it's going to be as large. That will probably be okay, but given that we've seen some evidence of slowdown in consumer spending, we should be concerned about that. And I think if we can get COVID cases under control, we're going to be in pretty good shape. But again, we've got schools starting here soon, and more people are going to be connecting with one another, and that could cause some spikes in COVID cases. We might as well accept that as a possibility. So we got a lot of things going on here. Some are good news for the economy, not so good news for the economy. I do like to emphasize some good news. Here's the latest we have on these initial claims for unemployment in the state. We're under 3,000. And aside from that, what I do hope and pray is now just a blip in an upward tick of initial claims that we saw in the first part of July. The trend is still getting us back towards the long-term levels. It may still take us a while to get down to under 1,000, around 500 or so, where we generally are in a long-term basis. But we're back on trend right now. Now, it's quite possible that the second, third, fourth week of August could see some uptick here, especially if there are some current concerns regarding stimulus money and so on. I think a stimulus, by the way, I should mention this, is still a good idea. If you want to think about our economy as a sick patient, at some point doctors want to see if the patient can recover on his own. We may not be there yet with our economy. We may still need to administer some medication to really get the economy to self-regulate the way a doctor would a patient. You don't want to cut the patient off too soon from any necessary medicine, or the patient's likely to collapse. We just need a little bit more stimulus, in my judgment, to get us through the fall. And that, I think, will continue to support this trend. It's quite possible, though, that if we can't keep cases under control, if we can't uh, uh, keep keep some stimulus money in the pockets of people who need it and will spend it, then job growth could stall again. Great news here on the continued weeks claim. We had that leveling off in the first part of July, but again, it looks like some folks are coming off unemployment. That's good news. That generally means that they're finding employment, and we'll kind of keep our fingers crossed on all of that. Maybe we're in a very fragile point in a recovery. Hopefully, the recovery has not been derailed the way I thought it was maybe 3 weeks ago. I think I'm breathing a sigh of relief. I think we're getting there. So where do I think things are going to be happening in terms of the jobs for the state and for the city? As things stand right now, if we get by with the July with a modest growth increase, I think August will have a modest growth increase too. Again, I'm going to be monitoring those weekly numbers. In 2 weeks, I may revise that upwards or downwards depending on what the weeklies are suggesting. The September figures, I have some confidence that we'll get well on track and start seeing the patient being able to breathe on his own, as it were, and the economy being able to self-regulate, hopefully by September, October. I see no reason at this point to be too negative about September and October and November. I'm just not willing to put out a forecast which says we'll get 20,000, 30,000 jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis back the fall. But some growth that's pulling us out of this deep wedge we're in, I don't think is unreasonable going forward. There are some risks to the forecast, to be sure, but I think that seems a reasonable pattern to me right now. So August may be a bit of a bumpy road, kind of like July has been. We'll be monitoring the numbers to see if any revision there is necessary. And in terms of the long-term forecast, this is a repeat of the same slide I used in an earlier presentation. All I'm really doing illustrating here is that blue line, I think, is going to be more representative of our recovery path. Long term, I think it's going to be a slower recovery than had originally been projected. So with that, I don't want to change the long-term plan just yet. We will see how August looks. If August starts tanking, then I will want to revise my long-term forecast. And frankly, if August starts looking incredibly good, I may want to go back to my original shorter forecast. But for right now, I don't see any reason to believe that we're going to be at a pre-employment or the pre-COVID-19 employment levels until we get to well into 2021. And maybe even further than that, probably into January of 2022, when we'll be through with the full cycle. So a little bit of a long haul, but I'm encouraged by some recent data. I'm bothered by some recent data, but this is the nature of trying to forecast a recovery. There's always conflicting information. Some is positive, some is negative. The trick is not to overemphasize either the positives or the negatives. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. We certainly all want a powerful and strong recovery, but at the end of the day, I think we're still kind of bouncing around here. We're going to have some days, some weeks, some months of good data and bad data, and I think our best bet is to react to that in the most rational way possible. So right now, I think July is going to post some reasonably good numbers, perhaps not great, I certainly wouldn't be super excited about July. And I'm not super excited about August in terms of job growth, but I think that the recovery has not been derailed. 3 weeks ago, I was very, very concerned about the recovery that were being completely derailed. I don't think that's happening, and I don't see any reason to think that so long as we maintain these good practices that I have on the screen here, and we do what we can to bolster consumer confidence and reduce economic uncertainty so that businesses have some faith that the economy will maintain some momentum. It's up to us as citizens to do what we need to do in order to, I think, control the spread. I really think with this cycle, it's all about trying to track those cases and push them down, push the cases down, keep the infection rates down, the positive test percentages down. To the extent that we as an economy can do this, we're going to be much better off. So with that, I will be planning to come back with an updated forecast in a couple of weeks. Certainly when we see the actual July data on the 21st of August. But until then, I'll be monitoring the data. I hope you're getting something out of these videos. I'm happy to continue to put them together. So with that, we'll close this out, and best of luck to all.